Taurus. Welcome to Pandora Astrology's monthly horoscope for December of 2021. Well, Taurus, there are really strong themes around intimacy and sharing and even debt this month. As you'll see, there's a pile of planets in your 8th house. And if you have things coming up for you in your relationships, then you'll find a link for a lifelong love reading in the YouTube description below. But you might find that things are coming up in the arena of debt or, debt reduction, trying to reduce your debt. And you can find out about your finances in a natal and transit reading. And there's a link for that in the YouTube description below too. Well, we have 2 planets that have been traveling in a square this year, and they're finally finishing up with this. One of them is Saturn, which has been traveling along through your 10th house. And the 10th house being the arena of career, and Saturn is the career planet. Saturn is very happy and comfortable here and has been pressing you to work hard to achieve your goals and to meet with success. And if you've been doing that, I think really great things may be happening in that arena. Saturn's journey through the 10th house will take probably a total of between 2 and 3 years. It'll probably still be here next year. But meanwhile, just to throw a monkey wrench into it, we have Uranus over here in your 1st house of identity and self. Uranus is the rebel, the change maker, the innovator, can be very scrappy and reactive. And when Uranus is traveling through your 1st house, it usually spends about 7 years there. And it's right in the middle of that 7-year journey. And it's been making you feel really rebellious, really reactive, really very much questioning a lot of things, including like, who am I? And how should I behave based on who I am? So a lot of your ideas may be changing and swirling around in your mind. And if that has kicked up some rebellious behavior, then that is absolutely interfering with the success that Saturn is pressing you to gain in your career. So this is how it's been landing for you. And happily, this is coming to an end here in December. It's almost done. Just hang in there till the end of December, and then these 2 will stop duking it out. Well, Julia, I think you've got something for the Tauruses of the world for about Mercury, Mars, and lovely Venus. What is that stuff?
I sure do, Jamie. Well, hey there, Taurus. I'll begin with Mercury. That's the planet that represents your mind. It rules communication and all of our mental processes. And wherever we have it that month is where we expend a lot of our mental energy. So Mercury starts the month in your 8th house of other people's money. This is also the house of research and investigation. So for the first 13 days of the month, your mind might be preoccupied with the money that you share with people close to you, like your partner or family, maybe through an inheritance or a joint credit card, as well as money that you get from institutions. This can include any type of investment, mortgage, insurance, for example. And since this is also the house of research, your mind might also be very probing for the first 13 days of the month as you deeply investigate some issue. Just be careful of not getting too paranoid, because that can also happen with Mercury in the 8th house too. Then on December 13th, Mercury enters your 9th house of education, travel, philosophy, and law. So with this transit for the rest of the month with Mercury in the 9th, Mercury is also a travel planet, and this is a travel house. So there might be some traveling that you're doing for the rest of December, maybe visiting some family or some relatives elsewhere. If any of the Tauruses who are on school, when Mercury comes into the 9th, it's a wonderful transit for learning more, for writing a thesis statement, especially for anything with a broad-based subject like philosophy, history, those types of things. And your mind also might be preoccupied with legal matters too, because that is another association of the 9th house. Then Mars, the planet of action and activity, starts the month in your 7th house of partnership and consultants. So for the first 13 days of the month with Mars in the 7th house, if you're in a relationship, then you might not be seeing eye to eye with your partner. You might be having more arguments than usual. well. A really good use of this transit is to try to find some shared activity that really helps you get out a lot of physical energy with your partner. Things like a house project or some other joint effort can really help sort of minimize the more challenging aspects of Mars in the 7th and maximize its constructive elements. Then on December 13th, Mars enters your 8th house of other people's money. So with Mars in the 8th, right after Mercury has left the 8th, this can be a time of some conflict around other people's money, maybe running into some flare-ups with family members, or if you're trying to get a loan, having it denied, because the 8th house can also represent banks too. The 8th house also rules social taboos. So anything that's kind of considered verboten because it's a taboo in some way. With Mars in the 8th house, you might be drawn a lot more to taboos and even into mysteries too during this transit. And then Venus, the planet of art, beauty, and relationships, starts the month in your 9th house. Again, this is the house of education, travel, overall expansion. And with Venus in the 9th, again, a really nice time to travel if you have the opportunity to do so this month. And it's also a wonderful time for the Tauruses who are still in school, taking higher education to kind of get along well with their teachers and anybody else in their institution. Venus in the 9th house, for all the single Tauruses out there, might mean that you get a crush on somebody who comes from a really, really different background than you. Maybe somebody you meet while you're away on vacation, or just somebody who's around, but who just kind of comes from maybe a different country or a different racial group than you do. Then on December 19th, Venus goes retrograde, and that's going to be a whole 6-week cycle that takes us all the way to January 29th. Now, when Venus goes retrograde, for all the Tauruses who are in a relationship, it's a time of review. It's a time of restocking your relationship, and you might be reviewing your relationship through a 9th house lens, which means you might be asking to yourself, does my partner expand me enough? Do we have enough of a sense of shared adventure together? Do we have a religious, this can also be a religious house too. So you might be wondering, are our religious and spiritual beliefs kind of not gelling so well together? And for all the single Tauruses, you could be sizing up your next partner, thinking about your next relationship in these terms too. And for everybody going through the retrograde cycle of Venus, this can be a time where we run into our exes, people who we used to date, or maybe even used to be married to. So you might run into them on the street or get a text from them randomly. So definitely prepare yourself for that.
Yeah, such good advice. And, I think that because Venus rules Taurus traditionally in astrology, that the Tauruses of the world might really feel it when Venus goes retrograde. So we have a couple of moons that I want to talk about. The nodes, South Node in Sagittarius, North Node in Gemini, have been traveling along through these signs for 18 months. So we've had several eclipse periods that play off of these nodes. And these nodes are teaching us something about data, logic, information, versus opinions, beliefs, things taken on faith, assumptions. And so this battle royal has been going on between these two poles of this single polarity. And as the nodes have traveled through these signs, when the moon meets up with the nodes, especially on a lunation, like a new moon or a full moon, then that's when these issues really, really come up very strongly. So we do have a solar eclipse here on December 3rd. And eclipses are occasions for being forced to look at our shadow. Solar eclipses, in particular, force us to look at our shadow through the behaviors that we evince. So watch your actions under this eclipse. This eclipse in particular falls in the 8th house for you. And as Julia mentioned, this is a house of debt. It's a house of sharing in general. So this has to do with the intimate connections that you have with others and the places where you pool resources with other people. So it covers your sexual relationships, your emotionally intimate relationships, like, for example, your relationship with your therapist, or a really close friend. And also it covers debts and loans of all kinds, both given and received. So watch your behavior in the arena of debt right around this moon and try not to act out of your shadow side. This moon is much more complicated than the other moon coming up later in the month. And so the good news here is that if things go wrong during that eclipse, they may unsnarl during the full moon coming on the 18th. And that full moon features a Gemini moon right here in your second house, and the sun still up here in the 8th house, which is rapidly emptying as the month goes on, with planets piling up in your 9th house. And I'll say more about that in a minute. So this full moon, usually a full moon is more emotional than a new moon, but when the new moon is an eclipse, it's a little different of a story. So this full moon actually has some beautiful harmony by trining Jupiter, which also sextiles the sun. And so this moon is a lot smoother. And whereas the eclipse we called heel breaches by how you act on your beliefs, this full moon we're calling broadened minds gain bigger hearts. This is an opportunity if you got into some arguments, if you got into some trouble over your debt, to smooth that all out by taking the right actions and by just letting your emotions smooth out, and by having more tolerance for other people's opinions, beliefs, and communications. So the last thing I want to tell you about is the seasonal change. And as I said a moment ago, many planets gathered here in your 8th house in the first part of the month. Over the course of the month, they all shift over into your 9th house, which is where the emphasis is here after the solstice. The solstice is when the sun moves into Capricorn. And Capricorn is a sign of hard work and achievement. And Capricorn appears in your 9th house of growth and expansion, which is kind of like a way of saying that your best way to grow and expand is through setting goals and achieving. And no better time than in the season of Capricorn. And so with the emphasis coming to this house, and particularly the sun, which represents your attention is like sunlight that you shine on things to help them grow. When your attention, the sun, shifts from the 8th house of your debt and your intimate relationships and moves into the 9th house of your growth and expansion, it's time to take your attention, put it into that area, and ask yourself, what's the next best way for me to expand myself? Whether that means traveling, whether that means furthering your education, whether that means broadening your mind through some reading, perhaps, in whatever form that it takes, set some goals in that arena and get ready to do some achieving during the season of Capricorn. Well, Taurus, that's what we have for you today. You can always find your horoscope on our website, pandoraastrology.com. And also you can find the forecast of the month with a video about Venus retrograde and the moons that are happening and any other news that we think you need to have. And you can get readings and you can take classes. You can find all that stuff on our website as well. And until next time, we'll see you around the cosmos. Bye-bye.
Bye.